I'd like to call this meeting of the Urbana City Council to order for Monday, November 6, 2017. Happy birthday, Bill Brown. Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council members Ammons.
Here.
Birthday boy Brown.
Here.
Hazen.
Here.
Jacobson.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Roberts.
Here.
Wu.
Here.
And Mayor Marlin.
Here. We'll have approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. We have October 16th meeting and an October 23rd public hearing.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Dennis, seconded by Jared. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. All right, that passes.
They were very thorough, by the way.
They were lengthy. Are there any additions to the agenda?
No.
Okay. Moving on to public input, I want to call your attention to the updated brochure that's in the back of the room. It gives information on basically how on Urbana city government, open meetings, how the meetings are run, and it addressed a lot of the questions that were raised a couple of weeks ago at the meeting. The clerk's office also updated the public input card, so I think it's clearer for people. We have one card instead of two now, I believe, and it should be easier for people to use. So thank you very much, Charlie and staff, for updating these. I don't have any cards from the public. Going once, twice? Okay. We'll move on to presentations. We have two tonight. First on the presentations is from CU Fresh Start, Tracy Parsons, Sylvia Morgan, Vivian Gray. Just as way of introduction, it was just about exactly 2 years ago this month that a group of people traveled to Peoria to learn about an approach that Peoria was using to address the increasing incidence of gun violence. And we met with an author of a book named, the author was named David Kennedy, wrote a book called Don't Shoot, and it described a really kind of innovative initiative and approach to interrupting violence. We came back to this community, and under the auspices of the Community Coalition, the community planned a new program or a new initiative called CU Fresh Start, and what was different about it is that it involved three components: law enforcement, it involved the community members, and it also involved service providers. And the intent was to address the gun violence that was devastating families and just damaging neighborhoods in the community. And it later became housed within the city of Champaign, and it's currently funded by a grant from the Champaign County Mental Health Board as well as the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. So Tracy and Vivian are here tonight to give us an update on the program and to talk about a survey that was recently conducted. So thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mayor. Good evening, council members. I think it was in the spring we were here to share with you about the work we're doing through CU First Start, and I shared with you that I look forward to coming back to share with you some of the results from our one-year planning pilot, is what we like to call it. And so, as the mayor shared with us, 2014 we started seeing news headlines like this across our media and the news regularly. So not only in Champaign, but across the state and across the country, in the last 3 to 4 years, we've seen an escalation in shooting incidents. Our community is not immune. So what I like to talk about our community and really the strength is how we chose to respond as a community. The mayor just shared with you some of that background, but we were able to establish through the Community Coalition what we call our MDT, our multidisciplinary team. There are a number of members of that team in the audience tonight. So Chief Cobb is here from Champaign Police, Preston James from the City of Urbana, State's Attorney Julia Reeds is here with us tonight, and then our community liaison that works directly with our participants, Dante Lotz from Prairie Center, are all here, along with Chief Morgan serves on the team, as well as the mayor, and then Vivian and I are staff to the body. So law enforcement brought this model to the table to us. Simultaneously, there was a street crimes task force put together here amongst our local law enforcement entities. That is a unique occurrence for our community as well. So what I mean by that is in the other communities across the state that are doing this work, Rockford, Springfield, Peoria, and here there's one jurisdiction for all of the law enforcement. So because we have Champaign-Urbana, the county sheriff's office, and then U of I police, we have multiple law enforcement entities that we've been coordinating and working collaboratively with. So the CU Fresh Start model is a focused deterrent initiative which focuses on those individuals who are most likely to be involved in gun violence. They have a history of it. They are known associates with individuals or groups or cliques, as we call them. Chief Cobb would say to me, we don't have a steady gang issue as in other communities do. These groups are cliques and groups, and these guys shift within groups fairly frequently. So the key parts of Fresh Start is this collaborative model that we talk about. So it's law enforcement, community, social services, and law enforcement all coming together to work on our project. We've been meeting twice a month at a minimum all year, working on this work. And the other parts that I really like about it is the neighborhood community involvement. We have an active group of formerly incarcerated individuals who have made changes and differences in their lives, as well as those families that have been directly impacted by gun violence. So a key component, obviously, is our partnership with law enforcement. I will share with you in my 20-plus years of working in the community, this has been the most positive, sustained working we've had with law enforcement in new and different, better ways, communicating in very effective ways.
As Tracy shared with you, in 2013 into 14, when we were noticing this spike in gun violence, is when the four agencies, your Urbana Police Department, the Champaign Police Department, the University of Illinois Police Department, and the Champaign County Sheriff's Department decided to pool our efforts and basically joined all of our, we all had our own individual street crimes type groups, and we joined forces with all of the four agencies and began to look at the problems we were having and address them in a more focused way, to surgically kind of go after addressing issues and going after the people and the cliques that were involved in this violence, that we could directly link to this violence. So we did that through some intelligence-led policing, and we worked closely with the state's attorney's office as we were doing this, able to make multiple arrests and getting some very successful prosecutions as a result of that, with 80 years, some 60 years, some 40-year sentences in the Department of Corrections because of some of these very strategically investigated investigations, I guess, that we did. So this year alone, we've had 78 guns that have been seized. The Street Crimes Task Force has seized as a result of their efforts. And right now, I think where we're starting to kind of look into the impact that this deterrence approach is having on the community and the violence, and that's kind of a little bit what we're talking about tonight.
So as the mayor and the other speakers before me mentioned, this approach is something which requires strategic focus of resources. And so in 2016, there was a call for proposals issued by the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority for locations in and around Illinois that were experiencing high volumes of crime to apply for support to implement this model. Having started the work prior to the application back in 2015, it was thought to be a good idea that Champaign-Urbana could benefit from these resources. So an application was made to the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority for funding to assist with the further development of the model. With support from the Champaign County Mental Health Board, we got resources to hire a social worker who would work directly with those gentlemen who participate in the call-ins to direct them to be able to access social services. So part of what we wanted to do, or part of what we were mandated to do to ensure that this model could work as effectively as it could, is to be able to identify the individuals who are responsible for causing the problems that we are faced with. So being able to identify the root causes of the problem, identify where the incidents are most occurring, and to better understand what it is that we're dealing with to be able to develop appropriate responses. So some of the things we wanted to learn from doing an analysis of the crime data was who are the people that are responsible for the violence problem, which are the neighborhoods that are most affected, the time of day, places where these incidents are taking place, the types of firearms that are being used, and some of the main factors that are driving the shootings. Is it that it's spontaneous outbursts of incidents at certain places? Is it street disputes? Is it gang and drug related? That type of thing we wanted to be able to understand. The data that I'm presenting here is not meant to demonstrate trends or that these are patterns that we're seeing. It's merely identifying that as a result of the crime data analysis, we are now in a position to carry out this ongoing sort of trend analysis to be able to identify what it is that we're dealing with. And I present you with a snapshot, just one example of what we're looking at. So what you see on the screen is a quarter-by-quarter analysis of shooting incidents going back to 2013. We're able to see each quarter and also daily what the shooting incidents are like. So we now have a running total up to the very last quarter of 2017, which shows you some numbers for shootings that we've experienced for the year up to date. Some of the other things that we've been able to do, so we can drill down further into the data. So we're able to see the level of victimization that the community is experiencing as a result of the shootings. So victimizations across 3 different levels: death arising from shootings, injury associated with shootings, and property damage associated with the shootings. We're able to go even a little bit further than that. So we're able to see how it has impacted Urbana specifically. So out of all the numbers that we've seen between 2013 and 2017, we're able to plug that much more deeply into the data. So what we're showing you here is just a snapshot of the type of data that we've been able to pull together. And here I should pause to say that the work of the Urbana Police, Chief Morgan and her staff, in particular, the crime analyst, Melissa Haynes, has been very, very instrumental in getting us the type of data that we want, working in partnership with the other law enforcement agencies for the county, Champaign, the Sheriff's Office, U of I Police. But a lot of what we've been able to do has been through the instrumentality of the Urbana Police Department and the analyst there. We can see as well, just if we look at month to date, so each month for the period 2015, 2016, 2017, what the incidents look like across each month. So we are able to compare October 2017 with October 2016 and October 2015, and all the way back to the time when the shooting incidents started to become an issue. Again, just giving a snapshot of some of the outcomes that we were able to see from the data analysis. So we're able to see that across the 3 areas of victimization, how much of it has has resulted in homicides, how much of it has caused gun-related injuries, and how much of it are associated with property damage. This will help us to understand better how we frame questions about what are we measuring, how are we going to measure success. Are we looking to see reductions in these, or is it something else that we want to be able to track over time? But these provide us with some very important starting points as to the type of impact that we should look to see whether the initiative is having. So as a result of the work that we did with the crime data analysis, we are better able to track gun-related incidents, and we're able to see a broader range of connections between the various gun-related incidents. There are some things that we really want to be able to do better. We want to be able to specifically pinpoint those things that are driving the shootings. As I mentioned, is it street disputes? What is it exactly that's behind the level of shootings that we are seeing? And also to be able to determine whether there are any circumstances or conditions that are contributing to these. Are people taking advantage of abandoned buildings or dark areas and that type of thing? In addition to looking at the crime data, we wanted to be able to see in those communities that are most affected by shootings, whether they have any difficulty. Is there a trust deficit? Is there anything that would prevent them from cooperating fully with the police as part of solving the crimes that are affecting those neighborhoods? Again, with the assistance of our analysts, we were able to do a spatial analysis to try and figure out where shootings are taking place. And we came up with a sort of baseline of those neighborhoods that had at least 2 shots reported between 2014 and 2017. So the green represents 2 shots, and the more shots, the more concentrated we go, then we get to the red. The community perception survey targeted persons who were aged 13 and above, who live, work, or participate in activities in the neighborhoods across Champaign and Urbana, as well as patrol officers and sergeants that work in the affected neighborhoods. The data collection happened between July and August of 2017. We had 296 responses in Champaign, 161 in Urbana, and 256 in that joint area between Champaign and Urbana, Douglas, University, Washington, that area. From the survey of patrol officers, we got 49 responses in Champaign and 37 in Urbana. This survey was done online, so it was completely anonymous. And I present you just some highlights from that survey. The respondents were asked about whether shootings in various forms, whether they perceived it to be a problem. You see law enforcement perception and the community perception. There is very little difference between how law enforcement and the community perceived shooting as a problem. This chart shows we started to separate the data out as to how the respondents in Urbana and Champaign and the Champaign-Urbana area responded to the question. And you'll see how persons in Champaign, the percentage that saw shootings in all its forms as a serious issue compared to people in Urbana, how people in Urbana viewed it, whether as a problem or not, and the Champaign-Urbana area as well. Law enforcement response across both Champaign and Urbana tended to be just about the same, as rating shooting in all its forms as an issue. We asked the respondents how they perceived safety during daytime and nighttime activities. 52% of all the respondents said that they felt fairly safe or very safe. That's across all 3 areas that we looked at. But we had about 9% who said they felt neither safe or unsafe, and about 30% of the respondents that said they felt very unsafe or somewhat unsafe. Respondents were also asked about their willingness to partner with the police. The majority of them, over 70%, said that they would call 911 to report a crime. But then a third said that they would also volunteer to organize a neighborhood watch group. The respondents, both police officers and community members, were also asked to indicate whether they perceived that law enforcement officers acted in a procedurally just way. Procedural justice is looking at issues such as whether police officers abuse their powers, whether they allow people to have a say in how decisions are made. And you'll see here that, generally speaking, community members' response tend to be more negative than how law enforcement responded to the question. It does give us some work to do, I suppose, to try and build the confidence that community members need to have in law enforcement in order for us to work more collaboratively.
So one of the main components of our work has been what we call our call-ins. This is when we identify those individuals, again, most likely to be involved in our gun violence issue. We did set up criteria that each one of the members met. We did have a community-led group that looked at the descriptions of the individuals, their history, and those individuals were identified by the community group. So at our call-in, we had a consistent message about the guns must stop, shootings must stop, and this was their opportunity to chart a different course if they were interested in that, and we would work with them. So we had 20 individuals that came in to our call-ins. We had 11 11 engaged with us. And we learned through this process what engaged meant. So the first time we were just pleased that they signed paperwork, but we found that we needed to put more requirement around what engaged and participation meant. We had 9 who chose from the beginning to not engage with Prairie Center and the initiative. 2 of those have gone back to Department of Corrections. 6 have very serious pending charges, and one of the young men was actually killed in one of our shooting incidents this summer. Of the 11 who chose to work with us, 4 have reoffended and not as serious as the others. 1 has been re-incarcerated for a parole violation. 1 is no longer with us, but he's no longer with us because he finished his probation or parole requirement and said, thank you, I'm ready to move forward on my own and don't need the support. And then we have 5 that are continuing to work with our community liaison. So I think really some of the really important work, and I must say to this body as we talk about to the community, we are not the direct service entity for this initiative. We are the coordinator, we are the facilitators of this work and this model. So we've learned some very important lessons, information about our process, our work, and the 3 pillars. So in the services and working with those individuals, not only are there those core issues that we often hear about, employment, housing, and financial support, but also we've learned more about the cognitive behavioral therapy, mentoring types of things that are needed, conflict resolution types of training, and then resources that are needed. On the community side, we like to talk about being a community that's rich in resources and those types of things. They're still pretty siloed, so what are our opportunities to help build collaboration and connection for those organizations and entities working directly with this population? Increasing trauma awareness. So we've talked a lot about trauma, but the impact is huge on us as well as the individuals involved. Doing more of that type of training, and then continuing working with law enforcement around training, and looking at those ways to address those historical trust issues that we know exist between low-income and African-American communities and law enforcement. So again, just talking a little bit about the needs of the participants that have been engaged with us and what we've learned. 1 is to do a stronger needs assessment once they come into our work. Strengths, weaknesses, challenges, educational levels, all of those types of things, getting a better feel for that. Then starting to look at how we help support in those intervention areas. So again, those basic needs areas of employment, education, housing, health care, those types of things, but also strengthening the case management, coping skills, conflict resolution. So many of these guys are very reactionary and not disciplined in their approach. And so that keeps them in the middle of conflict and issues and challenges. And so one of the things that Dante talks all about is getting each one of these guys a calendar or schedule book so that they could write things down, something we might take as basic, but you know, it's some of the things we've just learned in this first year. We've been challenged. So we have, because this has been a pilot year, we've learned from what do we do when a guy reoffends? What do we do when something happens from that place? So we've had to put systems and structures in place to address the challenges as they have arisen. And it's been tough, challenging work, and we've had to navigate some very delicate issues, but I think that's, again, bodes hard for the strength in our partnership and our collaboration. So in closing, it's been a good month of learning and putting infrastructure and systems in place, building the partnership and collaboration to, I believe, move us forward in a positive, proactive way of addressing our gun violence. Our community has been tremendous, as I said in the opening, about responses. So not only do we have Fresh Start, and we're not trying to say that we've solved anything here with Fresh Start. We believe we've built a pretty good infrastructure to address this work. I think all you have to do is look at the nightly news to see that Decatur and I guess I shouldn't say, just other communities around our community are on fire with shooting incidents and our gun violence. Our numbers are significantly lower this year. We've got community groups, faith-based groups, neighborhood groups holding vigils, community walks, rallies, and neighborhood groups. We've been doing in Urbana some really good work in the Valder area. You guys know there's been ongoing work in the Learman area. So looking at those areas that are most challenging to try to figure out how we connect with them better and support them and bring the work directly into the neighborhoods where this activity has taken place. So we have applied for additional funding that we anticipate receiving from the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. And we're just really excited about the work and appreciate a few moments on the agenda tonight to share our work with you over the last year.
Any questions? Eric?
So one of the things that you mentioned early in the presentation is cognitive behavioral therapy, but that didn't appear later when you had this list of all of the things that were provided at intake. So I'm just wondering, is there a, yeah, right, this is the one we put up. So I wonder, is there a systematic offering of behavioral therapy? It seems to me that if there's not, that this would be a fantastic charitable contribution for a wealthy medical institution housed at our community.
Well, I think, you know, we've just learned, you know, Dante, as our community liaison, has had a tremendous amount of, I don't know if I should call it burden or opportunity to really learn around the needs of what these guys are. You know, as part of collecting the data, we see just how many of these shooting incidents are over very small, trivial types of things, right? We expect it to be maybe over some of the, you know, drugs and money type, but the majority of these incidents are, you know, you dissed me in public, you said the wrong thing to my girlfriend, right, and all of these types of things that are the base for the activity. And so, again, what kind of therapy, what kind of supports, what kind of educational information can we help provide for these guys to help them be more successful?
Yeah, I believe in that the therapeutic model is one of the things that can be really, really helpful. And I think there's evidence for this, actually.
Dennis?
I wrote about 5 questions down, but I'm thinking maybe that's really, I don't have to ask those. This is really important work to approach the solution to community violence through community cohesiveness and expressions of concern, and really maybe trying to show that there are people in the community who care about these young people who are becoming lost through habit patterns of their lives, even speech patterns. I mean, I've heard conversations between people on the street where they are very aggressive and derogatory toward their own mates, you know, on a general basis, or their children. So these habits are kind of ingrained and very difficult to address. I just wanted to mention that the current issue of Smithsonian Magazine has a really interesting article about, it's called The Theater of War, and how in this instance, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but the use of modernized texts of Greek, not legends, but Greek theater, the classic Greek theater by Sophocles and others, dealing with the questions. You know, these are 2,500 years ago, but they're still contemporary, about dealing with conflict, war, warriors, the conflict that leads to death of family and loved ones are reenacted, and then there's conversation afterward for those people who came. And apparently it's very powerful, and they actually took this to Ferguson right after the shootings, about a month afterward, and it so impressed the neighbors, well, the officials there, that ultimately it's gone to the State Department, and there are people in the Pentagon who are saying that this therapy is so effective that it should be funded on a national level. But there's not going to probably be any funds for this, but that's what they're saying. So I just thought it might be something that you might find of use in engaging young people to think about their actions in a new way. I'm just saying that I read this and I was very impressed by the article. When an individual is called in, or you identify these individuals and you invite them to participate on the call-in, have you noticed any tendency, or what are the responses for people to being so identified? Do they realize that they are at risk because they're already engaged in in court procedure? Do they find it, are they willing to be identified as those who are at risk the most in the community?
Well, I'll answer it a couple different ways real quickly. So one is that because they are probation or parole, that and those organizations are part of our initiative, they are invited through that entity. So we learned between the call-ins that we can help with the transition, or at least giving more information about what they are coming to. So our community liaison, Dante, again, has with the second call-in, met the individuals before the call-in, so they had a better idea of what they were coming to. The first one, we did not do that, and they found out when they showed up, right? And so that's just something unique or specific for our community that, again, we learned through the call-in process to help with engagement, awareness, and yeah. Also in our community that's unique from the other communities is that we have a post-call-in event. So we give those that we've called in an opportunity to meet with law enforcement leadership, as well as, again, Dante facilitates that post-meeting where, again, they're able to ask the questions. The expectations are explained a little bit more thoroughly. And so those are some of the things we've looked at on how to engage and strengthen the engagement part.
So I can tell you, you're learning by doing, and that's pretty impressive.
Well, you know, this is a tough population. This is tough work. Our initial intent was to stop the violence. We're trying to engage a population, build trust, address those types of things, to give them an opportunity to stop the violence for us. And so if they are interested, I think the data shows that those that are willing to engage, they can have some success. It's not easy, though.
It's not guaranteed.
It's not
It's
guaranteed.
possible. Yeah.
Yes.
Aaron?
So, thank you all for coming to do the presentation, Dante and everybody involved in the program. The one thing that I always thought was unique about the program when I went to Peoria also to look at this program was that it was going to provide an intervention or resources that would be needed to help identify the root causes and to help individuals address those root causes. And so while I'm completely aware that there are some things that I will not try to defend, some behaviors or actions that I'm not going to try to defend, and that law enforcement is going to have to do their job. I would be being untruthful if I said that it didn't hurt me to hear that individuals were going to be locked away for 80, 60, 40 years. While I understand we have to do our job and law enforcement is going to do their job, it doesn't make me feel good to think about individuals being locked away for the rest of their lives. And likewise, it pains me deeply to think about those they may have killed or did take their lives and things like that. So I know it's a very tough situation to be in. The unique part of this program, which I think helped sell many members in the community, is the part that I would like to hear more about and to see put more in the forefront of this program and how it's being rolled out and how it's being implemented in the community. So, for instance, I went to the initial call-in. Very, very painful for me to sit in the room and see so many people in the room, press in the back of the room, individuals coming out in front of this entire community, many of them blindsided, and I recognize there have been some changes with that. I'm just giving you my story as to when I went to the first one, and the concerns that I have was that the push in the presentation is that we want to identify root causes, understand them, and work with the individuals to better their coping skills or things like that. Yet the things that I heard being said to these individuals were like, you are the reason why our community feels unsafe, right? And that was the first call in, things that these young men were being said to them, and they haven't even had a chance to be a part of the program yet. But that type of thing was being said to them, and it's not going to be tolerated. It was this big, strong, you know, here, look at all these other people on the wall that we've locked away, and this will happen to you. That is not the spirit of what I saw in Peoria, and so it pains me that the identification and understanding part of this isn't being celebrated or being identified and pushed more. So it is not my intent to be antagonistic or confrontational about this. I'm just giving you my honest feelings about it. And I think that something that could be done, I know that Bernard Lafayette was the key young man in the civil rights movement, and he goes around the country now teaching nonviolence to communities. I don't know what the budget is for Fresh Start program at this point? Is it something that is doable to have someone like that of his caliber come in and be a part of a coping or conflict resolution type of training for these young men, so that these simple things about stepping on my shoe or knocking a drink out of my hand doesn't result in some innocent person being killed or some needless situation escalating into being locked away or being someone losing their life. The other part of this, the part of it that is I'm curious about is the family members who are left behind. And I know that Fresh Start can only do so much. But when you mentioned, Tracy, that the other families are involved in it, and I know a couple of those individuals, is there an aspect of this that helps these grieving mothers and family members heal? Is there something that are resources available to them, for instance, that allow them to go through the process to help deal with this tragedy and even make them maybe more involved even in the community themselves? So that's a question.
So, two real quick responses. So, I think all of the members from the MDT would say to you, and they've heard me say, the visual of the call-in is very tough and very painful. All of the participants thus far are African American males, and it is a major driver for me and most of us on the MDT to address this issue from a culturally responsive way. And so the thing that I think has been my moment, or that I've talked a lot about, was one of those evenings sitting down watching the evening news, and a classmate of mine through high school, I went through Banner High School, and a classmate of mine on the news talking about playing in her living room with her grandson as bullets flew through her house. And that was my subliminal moment to say, this group is my priority, and this part of our community, when kids can't ride down the streets on their bikes, sit on their front yards, play in their yards, that's my driver. And so I want these guys to see the reality of what they're doing to our community. And they are wreaking havoc on our community, Aaron, with the actions that they're taking and how they're carrying themselves and how they're dealing with disputes. And so we on purpose want to have that tough, consistent message with them. So that is intentional as part of this work and part of this plan. The second part of your question around the family therapy, so we have had a couple of meetings with those families that have been impacted, that have lost loved ones. These have been very painfully emotional meetings and opportunities to bring those families together around understanding, having a voice, having them meet one another. And with our recent gun violence, these families aren't ready yet, to be honest with you. I'm talking about a lot of tears, a lot of anger, a couple of other cases that haven't been solved, you know. One of the family members stopped working with us as part of our planning team because her son's case hasn't been solved, and she can't look at the fact we're talking about giving these guys additional opportunities, and her son will never have an opportunity. So we've been trying to, again, I agree with, we can't solve it all, but we are trying to put as much infrastructure and training and education as we can about this issue in a comprehensive way. So I just wanted to respond to those.
Well, just quickly, I would say that if we're trying to do something different and inspiring folks to do something different, I don't know from my experience and from being in that room and knowing some of the folks are involved in some of this this work and interacting with some of these young people, they know that their homeboys are locked away for a long time. So seeing them on the wall in these pictures that they got 40 years and 60 years and 80 years, I don't see that as a deterrent for them, right? I think that it's, from my experience, it's going to be much more effective for them to see that someone like Dante or whoever this entire program is really has a primary focus on actually identifying the root causes, whether that be poverty, lack of education, inability to cope, or not having the best conflict resolution skills and things like that. So if the emphasis is there, my observation, Tracy, and to all those involved, is that that is not where the emphasis is. When I walk into the space and you telling me that what we're talking about is folks are going to jail, we want them to see the impact that they've had on the community. The individuals that they see going to the penitentiary is not the impact that they're having on the community, not in the way that they're going to see it. If you want them to see the impact and the grief of the families or the lives that have been snuffed out based upon their behavior, I understand something like that. I'm just advocating for the focus to make this program special and unique. The way it resonated with me was that that's what would have made it special. It's nothing new for law enforcement to arrest people and to give them lots of time and to use whatever skill set and whatever mechanisms in place to arrest people for doing things they shouldn't do. That's not new. That's not unique, right? So that's why I'm saying it feels right to me if the emphasis is on those areas of identifying those causes and giving the resources to do something like that to address those particular concerns. But again, I appreciate you all and your efforts. I understand that it's a problem for the community. I want folks to be able to ride down their street safely and children to play in the park and young people to be able to play at McFarland Field. I don't want a community like that. All of us want the same things when it comes to a safe community. I understand and respect that. So thank you.
Dean?
I was curious, when you do these call-ins, do you have any type of psychologist on hand or mental health professional that might help you identify somebody that's maybe cognitively behind the curve?
So I think that when we talked about the needs assessment part of this the call-in, I think that's where we're trying to see, just get a better feel for their strengths and weaknesses that can maybe help us identify a different strategy on how to reach them. Dante's done a phenomenal job of, if he was to share some of those stories of what he's done to try to engage with individuals to build trust and those types of things, as Aaron is talking about, he's gone over and beyond, I think, what we would probably expect anyone to do. But it's a tough part of the process, and each one of them are at different levels as you talk about that spectrum of where they are cognitively.
Right. I just thought it might be a suggestion if, I know resources are limited and everything like that, but if we had some type of psychologist that specialized in criminal behavior or even recognizing a lack of education or a lack of
So we have, as part of the year 2 application, put some money in to identify that skill level of a person or bring that component to our work.
Okay, thank you. And also, I wanted to say I appreciate your work and dedication. I think it's a good program. And I reached out to you in the past a long time ago, and we never got to connect again. But if there's anything I can do to assist with the program, I'm still around and have more time on my hands now than before. So.
Thank you very much. And let me just share with you, it's an approach, not a program.
Okay, thank you. Tomato, tomato.
Eric?
So given the results that you've cited so far, knowing even that they're preliminary, I would not suggest you're doing anything significantly different from what you're doing, except perhaps for involving mental health professionals more deeply. I happen to have a lot of knowledge about lithium. And one of the this is perhaps very controversial about, actually pharmacological interventions, but there are quite a few papers that show that low-dose lithium inhibits violent behavior. I'll send you all that, and I'm not making a specific suggestion that you try to employ that, but I'll send you the evidence, and it can just go into the background of everything that we're all thinking about.
Thank you. Bill?
Thanks for all the information. I've been to some of the community coalition meetings. I'm familiar with some of the activities and successes, and some of the failures, or some of the not so successful things. I guess a couple of things. For one, as far as the mentoring and peer support go, are there volunteer groups that you work with that help do that? Can you name any of the volunteer groups that help with that?
Well, I think, we have a big special community coalition meeting on Wednesday where we're going to be talking about all of this work more publicly. And I think what we have to do is strengthen those organizations. So whether it's Rosecrans, whether it's the Mental Health Board, whether it's First Followers, whether it's, the RPC and the program, we've got to get those entities better connected so that the strengths of the organizations and the resources to follow this population are better connected. I know one of the things Dante talks about a lot is how do we get these guys informed about what opportunities may be available to them. They're not part of the traditional systems and structures where, they're aware of things that may be available to them. And part of that is helping to encourage them that they can do things differently. And so that's where strengthening the mentor population for this group can be very, very important going forward.
Okay, and that kind of leads into another question was, have you identified gaps that, basically social service gaps that we have that we could boost? And where do you see the future of this going? You're in your second year of funding now, is that right?
We're just finishing our first, so we're going into our second year.
And do you have anything after that so far?
Well, Bill, I'm just glad to get us here where we are today.
Well, I know.
Obviously, we're talking about long-term systemic
right.
stuff. This is helping to set up the infrastructure. I would hope that we moved ourselves out of jobs or out of work, to be honest with you, because then that means we've done a better job of connecting those services and organizations that this is part of their mission to do. And so we aren't here to be critical of anyone or anything. It's just how do we strengthen this work. We know that if we can engage this population better, it makes our community stronger and better and safer and all of those types of things. So that's really the approach that we're taking, identifying those gaps as it relates to, I think Vivian's done a fantastic job of helping us organize so that we can see where those gaps are. I don't know if we have them all identified at this point, but it really is around connecting the services. It really is how do we bridge some of these historical trust issues with law enforcement in these identified communities. How do we help the law enforcement entities continue their collaboration, working together. They all collect data differently, for example, and they all code and do that all differently. So that creates a whole different scenario as it relates to evaluating the data and all of these types of things that we're doing. So it's not all solved, it's not all in place, but I think we've made a good first step.
I think it's a great learning process, and I think we've learned a lot, so far, and there's still more to go.
Yeah.
And then, so how does this fit in with the scenario that we discussed before about an adult assessment center? Would something like that fill in a gap, or is that what this would transition into? Some sort of
again, right now that's being discussed in other segments, right? It's a little bit different than this initiative, and that's really looking at the reentry population. But I think there's a lot of value in having a place that are able to deal with our mentally ill, deal with our ex-offender population, and have a place that combines some of those services. I think there's value that's been demonstrated that can be effective.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Dean?
Just curious, who's allowed at these call-ins? Is it open to the public, or?
No, they are public meetings, but these are invited guests.
Understood. Okay. Thank you.
But you as a city council member can attend if you'd like to to attend one of these. We- Yes, and city council members have, other council members have attended. Mary Alice?
So I was reviewing the survey, and first let me tell you, this is a tremendous amount of work. I know it takes a lot of effort to do this. The fact that you guys gathered the data, wrote the report in 3 months is a testament to your commitment to making sure that we have a baseline of data. So thank you very much for that hard work. I know this is nitpicky, but I had a question because I thought it was one number that really popped out to me, which was that the study found that most respondents, 77% had some interaction with cops in the past year. Now, most of those, thankfully, are police officers saying hello, which is nice. But I'm just wondering, that number really seemed high to me. So I actually went to a DOJ report and found out that they have a survey that's done every 3 years, and they found about 22% of the population interacts with the police at least once in a year. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that statistic.
It could be simply because of the population. In this particular case, we employed a specific methodology called purposive sampling, because what we were after were the views of people who live, work, and do business in the communities affected. So that narrowed us down specifically to those 12 neighborhoods. So it is within that 12 neighborhood, and then, of course, those who responded, the 1,086. So it is, and even within that, then we had only 714 valid responses. So it would be 70% of that 714 that we ended up with. And then we would add, of course, 86 police officers. So that would account for why the response of that 714 would be so high. Because we started out with only the communities affected, and then we only looked at those who validly completed a questionnaire, which took us down to 714.
Sure. Now, so, sorry, Chief Morgan, I'm wondering if this is a question for you. Do the police patrol heavier in those areas, the hot spots, I'm going to call them, that those shootings are taking place in?
Yes. I mean, that's a simple answer. I mean, if we're having shootings in those areas, we're much more likely to be there, yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. And then my next question was with the grant that you're applying for. So how much are you guys applying for? Do you guys have a figure, a round figure, or range? It doesn't have to be exact.
So we, in working with this funding source, we went from, a dream type of application that we've now found out won't be funded at the level. So we're going to be in the $150 to $170 probably $1,000 range for the second round of funding.
That's pretty small. So how many people do you hope to serve with that?
I don't think we're looking at it from that approach. I think law enforcement has done a good job of identifying our pool of potential participants from that way, but equally important is the resources that we're learning around to put for the guys, the research, and the coordination. So we'll continue looking for additional resources. We applied through public health this year for some funding that we didn't get, so we'll continue to look for resources to support the comprehensive approach to the work.
So I realize that the sex distribution of offenders is pretty skewed for male, but do you have any plans for dealing with females?
Do you want me to answer that? So the way we identify the people for the call-ins for this specific program it is done by a very strategic way, by identifying the people that are involved in the violence. And if a female is involved with a clique and becomes involved to that extent where she would raise to that level, then we would absolutely deal with a female as well.
So it's not just geared
No.
to males?
No,
Okay.
it just so happens that that's what we've had so far.
All right. I have one final question, I promise. So you had mentioned that you had learned some things from the initial call-in, and that you had 11 people out of 20 people that you had invited that joined the program. I'm curious if that percentage went up as you made your changes in terms of how you did the call-ins.
I don't know if I know that answer, but I do think we've learned through that process that we've got to have a process for engagement. So, for example, the first call-in, we were euphoric that each one of the guys that night signed the paperwork to say that they were interested. But we saw the numbers of how many chose to actually engage with our community liaison, which means attending meetings and talking and developing a plan. And so now we've put some structure into place around what does engagement mean, what does involvement mean, right? And so they'll have certain number of days to make a decision. They'll have certain number of days to meet expectation around engaging in the process, and then expectation around what that means. We are now starting to look at those issues around how long do they stay with us, those types of things, but we don't have the definite answers on all those things just yet.
So I suppose the best metric is non-reoffenders, right? Successful, being able to get a job and being able to be part of the community without entering back into the prison population.
That's the goal.
That's the goal. Thank you very much for all your work.
Time for one more question.
So you mentioned the resources, and Mary Alice mentioned them. I was curious as to what those resources are for the participants that they have access to. And I'm reminded of a model that was, or an approach that was used a long time ago called Scared Straight. We all watched some of those videos of people going, and that's the part that I never thought was successful or a good approach to things. And do you think, have you all considered at all, that maybe the participants would actually sign up and be more likely to engage in the process without a call-in, without a overarching or looming threat of arrest and stuff like that? Because you can still communicate that to them without doing it in a sort of public display type of thing. So just wondering if you thought maybe more people would participate if it wasn't a call-in.
Yeah, I mean, we've only had the preliminary conversations around the structure of our call-in or the structures of how we would choose to engage with these guys. Right now, what we have in place is the call-in method. And so I know that Peoria has, after 20-something call-ins, made some changes to their approach. I think we'll look to see what we gain from some of the other communities around what their process looks like. And so I think in the near future, the call-in will be the method, though, to try to engage the guys.
And the resources for the participants, like, I know we said social services and all that type of stuff. What would be the things that they have to look forward to that they would be able to access?
Yeah, I think that's needs-based. So for example, Township in Champaign has been real helpful with getting some of the resources needed around the driver's license issue that many of these guys have. MTD has done some preliminary work with us around bus tokens for those guys that don't have transportation. So we're continuing to try to find those resources. It's not all in place. I think, we learn as we go, and when needs identified, we're trying to find some of those things.
Thank you very much. I think our others presentation will reschedule for another night. It looks like it's not here. Unfinished business? There is none. Reports of standing committees. It would be, it was chaired by Aaron Ammons.
All right. So On behalf of the committee as a whole, I move ordinance 2017-10-063, an ordinance approving a First Amendment to an annexation agreement, 1901 South High Cross Road / Riggs Land Holdings, LLC, and Charles L. Wendling. Case number 2017-A-04. Community development. Do I have to read all that I thought you said I didn't. Oh.
A second.
Seconded by Bill. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Council Members Ammons.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Hazen.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
And Wu.
That motion passes. Yes, you
Ordinance-
have to read the whole thing.
Ordinance number 2017-10-064, an ordinance repealing Urbana City Code Chapter 17 and amending Chapter 15 regarding garage sales. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Bill?
Yeah, I mean, we started discussing this a little bit last week, and I think there's still concern that completely eliminating the chapter that would regulate any kind of door-to-door sales. It seems like there ought to be something else we could do. So I think I'd like to discuss it a little bit more tonight, and probably would suggest sending it back to the committee for further discussion and maybe some more research. I think the main thing that I still don't understand or have a good grasp of is how we could, it seems like there is a compelling public interest to know who's out doing door-to-door sales, so that if someone is ripped off or something, or so there's some recourse. And we regulate every other kind of commerce in town. We tax it, and I assume that if they're selling something, we'd probably tax that too. They should be collecting sales tax. So I don't understand why the reluctance to come up with a way to regulate the door-to-door sales, just because it happens to be a space where people also go door-to-door for other reasons and for non-commercial reasons to collect for charities or to get petition signatures. So I think we should look at regulating the conduct, not the speech, and if there's a way to separate out the commercial versus non-commercial, I think there might be something more we could do there.
Dennis?
And we should just mention that we've all received a letter, an email of concern from Kate Hunter and Jen Sandberger, who live on West Oregon Street, raising a couple of questions that probably could be addressed if we also looked at it again in committee.
Dean?
I know it's a complex issue. My understanding of it is that we can't be requiring one group of people to have permits while not requiring another group of people to have permits. For example, political activity versus business. But I think there is value in a citizen being able to call the police department and saying, hey, somebody just stopped by my house selling vacuum cleaners. I just want to make sure they're legitimate. And the city being able to say, yes, they stopped by and registered. They are a real company. They have a business license. So at least you know they're not burglars or up to something else. So if we have to give everybody permits in order to do that, to make the playing field even, then I would be in favor of saying that everybody should register, if I'm understanding it correctly. Hopefully I expressed that well. So go ahead.
Yeah. So we do regulate commercial conduct. That's not a regulation of speech. I think that the First Amendment does allow regulation of commercial conduct, and so in that sense recognizes the difference between, for example, political activity and trying to sell a product or a service.
Mary Alice?
So I'm also pretty concerned about completely removing this. I think we definitely if the if the council is open to keeping Section 17, but making some modifications to it. There's certainly some people out there who have ideas, including Kate Hunter at Oregon Street, who is talking about, for example, the time of day in which people can be allowed to come up to your door. Some of the things that, as I've been thinking about this and talking with other people, one of the things that actually concerns me a lot is signing contracts. People coming to your door, and certainly there's been a lot of activity of people coming to your door talking about different electrical services, but not just electrical services. There are other contracts that people walk around asking you to sell. So, for example, perhaps for any kind of bug spraying, right? I mean, I'm just kind of throwing out an example of a service that could have a contract. I think it's important that that we at least know who is out there. So if somebody comes up to a house and asks somebody to sign a contract, and they sign it, and then they're like, I'm not sure who these people are. I don't know why you'd sign a contract and not know who they are, but it's possible. They could call the city and say, hey, who are these people? And part of the process of registering as a commercial business would be you have to have a business in this, you have to have an actual address in this area, right? You have to have a telephone number. I think it's within the best interest of the community that we actually know that information, and so that when somebody calls in, it's not to say that you can't sell something. It's not to say you can't sell, it doesn't matter to me, magazines or whatever. We're not trying to regulate that. We're just trying to have some information about what people are doing on the streets. And if the public has a question in terms of how to contact these people, are these people really registered with the city? Has the city actually said, yes, they're a business? I think that is in the public interest.
Jim?
All of that said with good intentions. I think, Bill, your comment, commercial speech versus non-commercial speech, there should be a distinction. Unfortunately, the U.S. Supreme Court does not agree, nor does the Seventh Circuit, federal Seventh Circuit, agree in the Norton v. City of Springfield case. If you have to decide, is this commercial speech or is it non-commercial speech, then you are looking at the speech based on content. It's not a question of views, but it is a question of content. That's not to say we can't regulate. It means we would have to regulate anyone who wants to go door to door to solicit. It's not a question, you can regulate illegal solicitations because fraud, misrepresentation is not protected by the First Amendment. So if somebody comes up and asks you to sign a contract for a fraudulent service, that's not protected. The problem that you raise is how do they know? Who can they call? Where can they go? If we are going to regulate solicitation, then it has to be everyone who seeks to solicit. Somebody may come up pushing religious tracts at a homeowner, let's say. That doesn't mean that they're in fact really somebody who is trying to educate. They may be casing the joint, and they may be using that ruse to case the joint. Others may want to sell, poorly made vacuum cleaners, the old vacuum cleaner salesman type. If you say it has to be regulated, but somebody who wants to encourage you to vote for a particular candidate doesn't, you're listening to the content of the speech. That is what the Supreme Court has held in Reed. It's a strange opinion. As I said last time we were here, courts are struggling. What Norton said was, a regulation of speech is content-based if a law applies to particular speech because of the topic discussed or the idea, message expressed. A speech regulation targeted at specific subject matter is content-based even if it does not discriminate among viewpoints within that subject matter, i.e., somebody, we only allow people of a particular party, they don't have to register, but the other party has to register. That's not the issue. It's if you have to figure out what is being said to determine whether that falls within the regulation or not, that's content-based. And a number of courts throughout the country to this point have held that following the Reed versus Town of Gilbert decision, which was written by Justice Clarence Thomas.
Dean?
So would it not be constitutional for us to just require everybody to get a permit?
That would be constitutional because you are not deciding who gets a permit or who has to register versus who doesn't have to register based on speech. You're saying everybody has to register. It's the same with signs. You can regulate a sign by the shape of the sign, the size of the sign, where it's located. But when you start saying we're not going to allow temporary signs that contain a particular message, let's say, as in Reed, a temporary sign, 3x4 sign, black letters, white background, announcing where a particular church who has to move around because they don't have their own building and they don't rent a building, where they're meeting next week, versus other signs such as maybe realtor signs, which are temporary, which can stay up for the length of the house is up for sale. Courts make those kinds of distinctions. How do we know it's content-based? Because you have to read that sign to know that that particular church is having its services this coming Sunday at X location, not Y location, and you have to read the other sign to say, oh, that's a realtor's house sign.
That seems to be, to me, the simplest way to resolve this, is to simply require everybody to register.
I mean, from a policy standpoint, I have no problem with that, but you're going to have to make a choice. You can't say some, based on the type of speech or the content of their speech, are going to be regulated where others are not.
Eric?
So there is, I guess, a model ordinance in the village of Lombard. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they address the issues that you also are presenting to us and seem to be happy with their solution, which does involve obtaining a permit for solicitation and wearing a little badge that says that they have got the permit. And so perhaps we should look at their ordinance and any other model ordinances that
I'm happy to look at their ordinance, no
Yeah.
problem with that. Do you have a summary or a description of the metric that they use to decide who must register or get a permit and wear the badge and all that and who doesn't?
It looks to me as though everybody who goes door to door has to get this little badge.
Then
for
that's no
any-
for
any purpose.
you're not
And-
regulating based on content.
Yeah, and the village also sells no solicitors signs that people can buy.
Okay,
So,
covers all the bases.
Yeah, it looks as though they have all the bases. They have a time frame, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., Monday through Saturdays.
That's permissible. It's across the board.
So it looks as though it looks as though they, I mean, it looks as though they have considered all of the issues that you have raised, and at least on their village website, it looks as though they're happy with it. How it works.
As they say, they'll be happy with it until it's challenged in U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois.
Right.
But it sounds like, based on what you're describing, it's applicable to everybody. It's not based on content, whether they have to wear badges or not, as long as everybody is treated the same. You're not treating one speech versus another based on the content of the words being spoken. Time limits, I don't see that that's unconstitutional, again, as long as it's applied evenly.
And I assume that their trick-or-treating doesn't require a solicitor's badge.
In Lombard, they might. I don't know. I doubt it. The other thing is somebody's got to challenge it. I mean, the bottom line, I'm not suggesting that they do in Lombard, but the issue is what do you do when it's challenged, and how much is the city willing to go to the mat to move a case through the U.S. District Court and then go through the appellate court and maybe get to the, the U.S. Supreme Court. You're probably talking $250,000 to $300,000.
Okay, well, it sounds like this is going to require some more work. Jared, did you have something to add?
Only that, not that I don't love our esoteric conversations about free speech regulation, but we should probably save it for the committee of the whole.
Okay,
And not the city
so we have a
council.
motion on the floor.
So what's our action to send this back to council instead? Even though we already had a motion in a
I
second?
thought there was a motion to approve.
There
Yeah,
was.
There's a
There was a
motion on
motion
the
and a
floor and a
second.
second to approve, so.
So how do we?
So that fails. If it fails, then we can
we
make
gotta
another
take a-
Make a
motion.
new motion?
You can just make an alternate motion.
Then I'll make an alternate motion that we send this back to committee of the whole.
I'll second.
I'll third.
All right.
You can have it, Mary Alice.
Dennis and Mary Alice. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And we will want to find out about Girl Scout
Cookies.
cookie sales,
I
too.
gotcha on that.
And Boy Scout popcorn sales.
Yeah.
And selling Christmas wreaths.
I know.
And noticing for
Is there any opposed?
neighborhood.
They all have to
neighborhood
register with
events.
Charlie.
Okay, so that motion has been moved, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
So that's sent back to committee.
All right.
Item C? Yeah, roll call. Do we need roll call? Yes.
How you doing there, Chuck? All right. Resolution number 2017-10-071R. Resolution for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code MCOR Project 1, Green Street Improvement, Wright Street to Busey Avenue, PE 3, Public Works. On behalf of the committee, I so move.
Second.
He can
I think
have it.
Jared got it.
Jared can have it. Fine.
Who had that one?
Jared.
Okay. Seconded by Jared. Any further discussion? Is this roll call? Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Councilmember Zaman.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Hazen.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
And Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Ordinance number 2017-10-065, colon. An ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 3-43, increasing the number of Class R-1 liquor licenses for Lumen Incorporated, 300 South Broadway Avenue, Unit Number 142, Urbana, Illinois, 61801, close parentheses, dash mayor.
Madam Chair, may
Yes.
I please excuse myself from the vote on this as I'm required to by the state
Yes, you
liquor
may.
code.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mary Alice. Any further discussion?
I think that's a comment on a colon, but, go ahead.
Wait a minute, don't, come on, man, don't do me like that, Dean.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
City Councilmember Zaman.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Hazen.
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
And Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes. And I do appreciate your detailed reading of these.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Reports of special committees.
Oh, Mayor.
Yes. Dennis.
It's not a committee, but I just wanted to say that the Champaign-Urbana Folk and Roots Festival was a huge success this weekend. Enjoyed so many singing and performance, artists performing in downtown Urbana. I saw lots of pizzas being ordered at one location. A lot of beer was drunk at others. So I think it was a huge success, and I think I appreciate the fact that the city of Urbana supports it so well.
Thank you. And reports of officers. Bill Gregg.
I wanted to report a pretty special opportunity for one of our staff members in the Public Works Department. Scott Tess, our Environmental Sustainability Manager, has been invited to participate in the ICLEI and U.S. People's Delegation attending the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change,
Wow.
the 23rd Conference of Parties. The conference will develop the implementation plans for the 2015 Paris Agreement on reversing damage to the climate. The U.S. People's Delegation will share the stories of cities, universities, and community organizations who are on the ground now working to build clean energy and reverse climate change. The delegation will demonstrate to delegates from around the world that families, businesses, and communities are committed to implementing the Paris Agreement to halt damaging climate pollution while showing the way forward for state and national governments. Scott will participate in panel discussions, interviews, and meetings with colleagues from other organizations during the conference in Bonn, Germany. He's leaving tomorrow, and he has all his expenses paid for through funding efforts. So he was selected with all the things that are going on here in Urbana, so that's pretty amazing. So I just wanted to share that with you. And we'll hear back of his experiences later next week.
Wonderful.
Hey, and I'd like to say, if I could, that he also has done some significant participation in making environmental decisions in Malawi with our Sister City program.
It's a tremendous honor for Scott. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Couple of I just want to make a quick report on a couple of things I've done along with some other folks the last week or so. Last week I traveled to Des Moines along with planning manager Lori Pearson and one of our economic development specialists, Libby Horwitz. We joined a group that was organized by Champaign County First. Des Moines has had tremendous success in the last 15 years in a lot of areas, especially in economic development and support of entrepreneurs, and we wanted to see what we could learn from them. And although it's a much larger community, much larger corporate presence, I think what we all came away from were some themes. One is that regional collaboration for economic development is just critical. They about 10, 15 years ago, joined an 8-county area together, 23 different chambers of commerce, and decided to work as one to bring development and growth to the area, and it's been extremely successful. So that was one takeaway. They've spent a lot of time looking at workforce development, talent development. They've created an ecosystem for entrepreneurs, and that was we learned a lot about that. They focused a lot on making Des Moines a place where people wanted to be. Placemaking is the term that you hear these days, but they've really spent a lot of effort on that. And they were just very, very focused on developing an identity, a brand, speaking with one voice, always having one mission, and viewing themselves as one region. So I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from places like Des Moines who have managed to pull together a coalition and a group of counties to really work for the region. So that was instructive. This week, Mayor Deb Finan and I are actually traveling to Indianapolis. We've both been invited to participate in the Mayor's Institute on City Design. This is sponsored by the United States Conference of Mayors and the National Endowment for Arts. And what they do is invite mayors to bring a case study, a challenge or a problem in their community that they'd like to address, and they bring together a group of 8 mayors plus urban planners and architects, and you each present a case study, and then you get input and you discuss the project and hopefully get ideas and learn about new approaches. So Deb is her case study focuses on the Neal Street corridor and the plaza downtown, and I chose the Lincoln Square Landmark Hotel and surrounding parking areas, and it's suddenly becoming even more exciting with the recently announced auction of the hotel. So I hope to come back with some ideas and maybe some new approaches for this. All expenses to this 2.5-day workshop are paid for by the U.S. Conference of Mayors, so no public dollars are being spent.
Mayor,
So-
can I ask a question about
Yes.
that? So I think that's a great topic for you to carry over there. Are you going to do a presentation? Do you have like a slideshow or something of the location and the structures so that everybody has kind of a ground idea of what we're looking at? But
Oh, yes, absolutely.
right,
yeah.
all right. Just checking on, how the
I've learned,
presentation would be.
I've had, staff has helped pull together some amazing, it's too late.
Images?
Images, yeah, GIS images,
Yeah.
3D imaging, and it's remarkable. So
Great.
I might even do a shortened version of it some meeting if you'd like to
Yeah,
see
I
it.
would love to see
So-
the presentation and hear about
Yeah.
recommendations. I think it'd be fascinating for all of us.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. So I'm excited. I think I'm looking forward to seeing what people think, looking at it from different eyes. Okay, last order of business here is a appointment to the Human Relations Commission. Carletta, did you want to speak? No. Okay, I'll just read it. This is from Carletta Donaldson, and she's here in support of Brianna Donald, appointment to the Human Relations Commission. She says it's a great appointment, already politically active, and active in the community, it looks like. So I would like to nominate Brianna Donald to the Human Relations Commission. She's been a resident of the city of Urbana for the last 16 years, and I think that's her entire life. She's currently a student at Urbana High School. She's going to be filling the vacancy as the student representative on the commission. And she's already received a number of academic honors and has participated in many community programs and events. So, is there a motion?
I move that we accept this nomination.
Okay.
Second?
Second by Bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Great. Thank you.
I just wanted to also say that I know Brianna from her political activities. She was a big supporter of someone who came to town on campus, and she was just chomping at the bit to have an opportunity to meet this individual. So Representative Ammons made way for her to meet Bernie Sanders behind the bleachers, and it's a moment I'm sure she would never forget. But Brianna is an amazing young lady. I'm very excited to see her be able to fill this position and to have young people involved in our government. So thank you for that appointment, and thank you, Brianna, for your service.
And I hope to see more, work on ways to get more young people involved. So this is a great beginning. Well, okay, no further business. We are adjourned.